I think Eminem said it best when he said, a lot of people ask me stupid fucking questions. And I can relate because a lot of people ask me some really stupid fucking questions, amongst them being, Ben, why do you do what you do? Why do you insist on putting out the absolute best content as it relates to training to build muscle and get stronger that anybody would ever find? And why are you doing it for free? A lot of people are willing to pay big bucks for information that's not half as good as the shit you're putting out for free. So what the fuck's up with that? And my answer's always been, and it will always be, it's for the kids. I do this for the kids. There's a lot of kids out there that want to get jacked out of their fucking mind. They have no idea what they're doing in the gym. So why not me? Why not someone who can explain things in a way that anybody can understand it and practically apply it immediately? So I decided to take it upon myself, start my own little series here called Popular Biomechanics for Kids. And this is the first episode. Presses. Or heavy presses, rather. Because if you kids want to get jacked out of your fucking mind, you gotta lift those big ass weights. So, we'll do a quick little review of the universal law of levers, see how it applies to presses. And the reason for this is because if you want to build the most amount of muscle possible, you got to recruit and fatigue as many muscle fibers as possible throughout a muscle's entirety without overworking your capacity to recover. So you can pick whatever exercise you want, but you have to understand that no exercise is going to subject the muscle to the highest levels of tension possible throughout its entirety. And this is largely due to the role that biomechanics will play. So if you understand biomechanics, you can say, okay, if I do this exercise in my strategy, it will overload these muscles at this range. Therefore, I also need to include an exercise that does this. So biomechanics will point you in the right direction in terms of what else you need to include in your strategy to maximize your return on investment of time and effort. So let's get started. The universal law of levers has two variables that you need to understand: the lever and the direction of resistance. The lever is your bone that your muscle is attached to. The direction of resistance is very simple. Anytime you're doing an exercise, let go of the weight, and whatever way it goes, that's the direction of resistance. The way biomechanics operates is that when those two variables are parallel to one another, the lever's inactive. The muscles that pull on that bone don't have to do much work at that range. When they're perpendicular to each other, it's a maximally active position. This is the position that the muscles have to do the most amount of work to overcome the resistance. So how does this apply to a press? Well, let's take a look at our little diagram here. We got a guy doing a press on the left and a brief synopsis of the biomechanics of the press on the right. So that's a everyday RPCA. You see him in the gym all the time doing all sorts of shit. That's Rudy Poo candy ass for anybody keeping score with the abbreviations. And the synopsis suggests this: the resistance to overcome increases until the working lever is perpendicular to the direction of resistance, after which it decreases until reaching end range. So there's a couple of questions you need to ask anytime you include an exercise in your strategy, and the answers to them will point you in the right direction in terms of what else needs to be included. So in no particular order, what muscle is stretched the most if you do presses? If you go through a full range of motion, it doesn't matter if you're doing overhead, incline, flat, or decline presses, the pecs or the delts or both will always be stretched the most. And the muscle that's stretched the most is recruited the most. So next question is, at what relative length are those muscles when the resistance directly opposes them? When the lever is perpendicular to the direction of resistance, what length is the muscle in? Well, as you can see in the diagram, it's not in a fully lengthened position, and it's not in a fully shortened position. It's closer to its mid-range. So the muscle involved in the lift is being overloaded at its mid-range. Other things you might want to know: what could potentially become a limiting factor? If you're doing presses, it's the triceps. Because whatever the smallest muscle is, or any muscle that doesn't have an opportunity to disengage, the more work you do, it can become a limiting factor. This should influence how you do what you do. And then finally, how will the body compensate? If you're using too much weight, or the primary muscle groups are fatiguing, how will the body take the path of least resistance? What will show? Well, if you're doing presses, the elbows will flare or the shoulders will rise and round. And what's happening is that your muscle's capacity to produce force is at its highest when the involved muscle is at or near its mid-range. Its capacity to produce force is lower at its end ranges, longest and shortest position. So if you're doing a press and your body's compensating, what it's trying to do is prevent the working muscle from getting into its shortest position because it's not strong there. So the shoulders will rise or round or the elbows will flare to keep the insertion point of the muscle further away from where it originates because that's where it's stronger. At the bottom here it says, therefore, if you do presses in your strategy, the muscles involved are not overloaded in their shortest position. That's very, very important because while you might want to include presses into your strategy because you can use a lot of weight and you can do a lot of work and you can promote a lot of growth, you're not going to overload the muscles throughout their entirety. So at what range are they not overloaded? In their shortest range. So if you include presses in your strategy, you have to be aware of this. Now there's one thing to add as well, that if you're doing overhead presses, when the muscles are in their shortest position, they're still doing a lot of work because they have to stabilize the bar over your head so the bar doesn't fall forward or backward or to the side or whatever. So in that case, you wouldn't need to do much work with other exercises to overload the muscles in their shortest range because they're doing a lot of work in their shortest range already. Not directly though because of biomechanics, because the lever is more parallel to the direction of resistance at that position. So you need to understand these things, kids, because if you want to get jacked out of your fucking mind, you got to pick the exercises that are going to overload the muscles to the best of your capacity. And depending on what exercises you choose, that should determine what other exercises you're going to need to include. If you like this information, feel free to share. Click the fucking button at the bottom, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep bringing it. This is just the first episode of Popular Biomechanics for Kids. We're going to talk about other exercises and the effects that they will have. So you have a better idea of what else you need to include in your strategy should you do those exercises. And this will just keep going and going and going. And hopefully it can be as wildly successful as that old show Popular Mechanics for Kids, only bigger. Biomechanics, build muscle, get bigger. You get the picture.